He betrayed the woman who gave him everything: her heart, her home, and her fortune, only to discover it's too late that her final goodbye was the beginning of his downfall. Michael Thompson was the kind of man people noticed. He had a smooth way of talking, always smiled at the right time, and carried himself like someone who belonged at the top. He wasn't born rich, but he knew how to act like he was. How he won over Eleanor as wife. Eleanor was elegant, kind, and came from a very wealthy family. She had inherited her father's business, several properties, and a name that people respected in their city. Many wondered why someone like Eleanor would fall for Michael. But to her, he was a second chance at love. Eleanor had been married before. Her first husband, Harold, was a quiet, intelligent man who had passed away from cancer just 3 years into their marriage. He had loved Eleanor deeply, and she had never expected to find love again. Then Michael came along. He was charming and attentive, made her laugh again. At the time, he was working in real estate and was trying to build a name for himself. Eleanor admired his ambition and energy. Even though he was almost 15 years younger than her, he made her feel young again. After only 8 months of dating, they got married. People talked, of course. Some of Eleanor's old friends said Michael was only after her money. They had seen the way he dressed, how he liked expensive things, and how he always ordered the most expensive wine at dinners. But Eleanor refused to listen. She believed in giving people a chance. And besides, she had always handled her finances smartly, or so she thought. Their life after marriage looked perfect on the outside. They moved into Eleanor's beautiful home, a 3-story mansion with a swimming pool and a rose garden that she loved. Michael was always around when there were parties, standing beside Eleanor and greeting her guests with charm. He would hold her hand, call her darling in front of everyone, and smile as if he truly loved her. People admired how close they looked. No one saw the small cracks forming in the background. At first, Michael seemed to care. He accompanied Eleanor to charity events, showed interest in her business meetings, and made plans for vacation homes. But slowly, things started to change. He began staying out late, claiming he had late client meetings or urgent deals. Eleanor, though suspicious at times, trusted him. She had no reason not to. After all, she had given him access to everything: her house, her cars, even some of her accounts. She believed that marriage meant trust. Michael started traveling more. He told Eleanor it was for real estate work, to meet investors or check new properties. Sometimes he would be gone for days. When he returned, he brought her gifts sometimes. Perfume, sometimes scarves. But she noticed something strange. The gifts looked expensive, but not thoughtful. It was as if he bought them quickly, without thinking about what she liked. She didn't say anything. She wanted to believe he loved her. What Eleanor didn't know was that Michael had started living a second life. During one of his business trips, he had met Chloe at a hotel bar. She was young, just 25, working as a waitress, and dreaming of becoming a model. Michael was immediately attracted to her. She was full of energy and had a way of laughing that made him feel powerful. Michael looked like a successful man, well-dressed, confident, and clearly wealthy. When he told her he was in real estate and owned multiple properties, she believed him. He didn't mention Eleanor. At first, their meetings were casual, just dinners or drinks. But Michael became more and more obsessed with Chloe. She was everything. Eleanor wasn't anymore. Young, fun, full of dreams. And Chloe enjoyed the attention. Michael took her to fancy restaurants, drove her around in Eleanor's luxury car, and even promised to help her build a career. He told her she deserved better and that he wanted to take care of her. To do that, he needed money. And the money wasn't his, it was Eleanor's. Eleanor had always managed her wealth carefully. But after marriage, she had relaxed a little. She trusted Michael. She had given him power of attorney, which meant he could handle legal and financial matters. On her behalf, it was supposed to be temporary, just in case of emergencies. But Michael used it to slowly drain her funds. He didn't take large amounts at once. Instead, he took small amounts frequently. Over time, he spent thousands on Chloe paying her rent, buying her clothes, even sending her on solo spa trips. She thought he was a millionaire. In truth, he was bleeding his wife's fortune. Eleanor's health started to decline around this time. She had been diagnosed with a mild heart condition, and stress made it worse. Michael seemed supportive, brought her soup, reminded her to take her medicine, and even hired a nurse to help when needed. As soon as he left the house, he was back with Chloe, laughing, drinking, living a double life. Some days, he didn't come home until after midnight. When Eleanor asked where he had been, he gave the same answers: client meeting, property visit, or emergency. At the office, his phone was always on silent. If it rang, he would step out to take the call. He had become an expert at lying. Eleanor began to feel a strange emptiness. She couldn't explain it, but something felt wrong. The house that once felt warm now felt cold. Her husband, who once held her hand, now barely looked at her. Still, she told herself it was just stresses or hers. She didn't want to admit that her marriage might be broken. Neighbors still saw them as the perfect couple. They attended charity galas together, posed for photos, and smiled at reporters. No one knew what was happening behind closed doors. Michael was careful to keep up appearances. He knew how to play the part, but the more he spent, the more careless he became. He started making bold financial moves, buying luxury watches, booking trips for Chloe to Europe, and even investing. In a new apartment, under a fake company name, Eleanor noticed the bank statements were getting longer. She also realized some of her valuable artwork was missing. Michael had sold it, telling her it was being cleaned and valued. One day, as she sat in her home office, Eleanor looked at her old wedding photo with Harold. She felt a sharp pain, not just in her chest, but in her heart. She realized something she had refused to see for months. Michael didn't love her anymore. Maybe he never had. She had been so lonely after Harold's death that she had rushed into a marriage, the man who only loved her money. The realization broke her, but Eleanor was not the kind of woman to act on emotion. She had been raised by a businessman father who taught her to think before reacting. So instead of confronting Michael, she began to plan. Quietly, carefully, she started keeping records, bank statements, property documents, even Michael's travel details. She called her lawyer and asked to meet privately. She said she wanted to review her estate plan. Her lawyer, a man named Mr. Langley, had known her for years. He saw the sadness in her eyes but said nothing. Eleanor told him she wanted to make changes, because she also wanted her new will to be a surprise, revealed only after her death. At home, she acted as if everything was fine. She still smiled. When Michael entered the room, she still asked about his day. But deep down, she was building a wall around her heart. She began to prepare for a future where he wouldn't be part of her legacy. Michael, meanwhile, continued living as if nothing could go wrong. He thought he had everything under control. He didn't notice the way Eleanor looked at him differently. He didn't see that the woman he thought was fragile was quietly outsmarting him. And so, the days went on, one pretending to love, the other pretending not to know, but time was running out. For Michael, the real surprise was yet to come, because Eleanor had one final lesson for him, and she was going to teach it not with anger, but with silence, precision, and the sharp edge of truth. While Eleanor was at home struggling with her illness, trying to make sense of her life and marriage, Michael was getting deeper into a world of lies and pleasure. His days were no longer focused on work or his wife's needs. They were focused on Chloe, the young woman he had met in a hotel bar. It's the woman who had completely taken over his attention. Michael had first seen Chloe while he was staying in a luxury hotel downtown. He had told Eleanor he was there to meet an investor, but there was no meeting. He just wanted a break from the quiet sadness of his home. That night he went to the hotel lounge for a drink, and that's where he saw her. Chloe was working as a waitress, wearing a tight black dress and carrying a tray full of cocktails. She was full of energy, laughing with customers, flipping her long hair, and moving with the kind of confidence that made her stand out in the crowd. Michael watched her from across the room, and by the time she came to take his order, he already had a plan in mind. He started with compliments, telling her she had a lovely smile. She laughed politely, used to men hitting on her, but something about Michael was different. He was dressed in an expensive suit, wore an expensive watch, and spoke like someone important. He seemed like a man who had money, power, and no shortage of charm. Chloe was curious. She stayed a little longer at his table. Michael told her he worked in real estate and owned several properties. He never mentioned Eleanor. That first night, they only talked, but by the end of the week, they had gone on their first date. Michael took her to a rooftop restaurant and paid for everything in cash soon. Michael started visiting Chloe almost every day. He would make up excuses to leave the house, property visits, investment talks, legal meetings, and go straight to Chloe's small apartment on the city's west side. She lived alone, barely earning enough to pay rent, and Michael saw an opportunity to play the hero. He told her she deserved better and promised to take care of her. Chloe believed him. She liked the way he treated her, the gifts he gave, and the rich, exciting lifestyle he showed her at first. Michael used his own credit cards for gifts, jewelry, perfume, fancy dinners. But his real estate business wasn't making enough to cover this kind of spending. That's when he started using Eleanor's money. She had given him access to her accounts months earlier, trusting him completely. She had thought he would help manage bills and pay household expenses. Instead, he started moving money into his private account. He was careful not to take large sums at once. Instead, he withdrew small amounts often, hoping she wouldn't notice. He spent thousands of dollars on Chloe without blinking. He rented her a new apartment in an expensive high-rise building with a view of the river. He bought her designer clothes, a gold bracelet, a new phone, and even paid for her to take professional modeling photos, which he mentioned that she had always wanted to go to Paris. Michael booked the trip for two. He told Eleanor it was a work conference. She believed him and even helped him pack. Chloe had no idea Michael was married. When he was with her, he acted like he was single. He talked about their future, moving to another city, starting a business together, maybe even marriage. He painted a perfect picture of a life filled with travel, success, and freedom. Chloe started calling him her man. She bragged about him to her friends and posted carefully framed photos of their dinners on social media. Michael always made sure he wasn't in the pictures. He knew better. Back at home, Eleanor was growing weaker. Her illness made her tired all the time, and though she had a nurse during the day, she still needed emotional support. Michael. He had become distant, cold, and often impatient. If she asked too many questions about where he would get angry and say she didn't trust him. Eleanor hated arguing. She usually fell silent and blamed herself for being suspicious. She thought maybe she was imagining things because she was sick and lonely, but the signs were becoming harder to ignore. Once, she saw a receipt in his coat pocket for a diamond necklace. He told her it was for a client's wife. Another time, she found a booking confirmation for 2 first-class tickets to Paris. He claimed it was for a business partner and his girlfriend. Eleanor didn't argue, but her heart broke a little more every time. The man she had once called her miracle had turned into a stranger. Even Michael's friends began to notice his strange behavior. He would cancel meetings at the last minute, show up late to appointments, and seemed more interested in showing off his luxury lifestyle than actually working. Some friends tried to warn him, told him he was acting reckless, but he brushed them off, believed he was too smart to get caught. Michael started gambling occasionally, first just small games, then larger bets. He believed he was in control, but the truth was, he was addicted to the thrill. He was living a fantasy life, and he didn't want to wake up. Chloe encouraged him to take bigger risks. She liked the expensive gifts and the fancy lifestyle, and Michael wanted to keep her happy. He convinced himself that one day Eleanor would pass away and everything would be his anyway. He thought he was just spending a little early, but the money was disappearing fast. Within a year, Michael had spent more than 2/3 of Eleanor's fortune. He sold one of her antique cars without telling her, borrowed money against one of her properties. He even used Eleanor's name to secure a loan from a private lender. The documents were legal, but Eleanor had never signed them. He had forged her signature. Chloe began to ask questions. She wanted to know why Michael didn't introduce her to his family or friends. He told her they were too traditional and wouldn't approve of their age difference. He told her he was trying to separate from his past life and start fresh. Chloe believed him, at least for a while. At home, Eleanor started to notice that her favorite paintings were missing. Michael said they were being cleaned and framed. She didn't believe him, but she didn't argue. She was afraid of knowing the truth. Her heart couldn't take it. Still, late at night, she would sit in the dark, looking at the empty wall. Wondering where it had all gone wrong, Michael's lies grew bolder. Once, he told Eleanor he was attending a 5-day real estate retreat. In reality, he flew to Italy with Chloe. They stayed at a villa, drank champagne by the pool, and danced in candlelit courtyards. Chloe believed this was the life she had always dreamed of. Michael acted like the perfect boyfriend, caring, funny, and rich. He told her that as soon as he handled a few legal issues, they would move abroad and start a life together. But while he was sipping wine in Tuscany, Eleanor was being rushed to the hospital after collapsing in the garden. The nurse had found her unconscious and called an ambulance. She was diagnosed with severe dehydration and heart strain. She stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Michael never picked up his phone. He told her later that he had no signal in the mountains. Eleanor didn't say anything. She didn't ask why he didn't come back. She just lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The trust she had once placed in him was gone. But instead of crying, Eleanor began to feel something else: clarity. She now understood the truth. Michael didn't love her. He had used her. Every kind word, every hug, every promise, they had all been lies. Now he was spending her money on another woman. But Eleanor was not going to react with drama. She had spent her life building things: her family name, her charity work, her reputation. She was not going to let one man destroy it all. Slowly, silently, she began preparing for what came next. She hired a private investigator. She told the nurse to keep records of when Michael was home and when he left. She started printing bank statements, highlighting strange transfers. She took photos of empty spaces where her paintings used to hang. She even asked her lawyer, Mr. Langley, to look into recent property loans. Mr. Langley was shocked by what he found. He asked her if she wanted to file charges, but Eleanor said not yet. She wanted to wait. Michael returned from Italy looking tan and happy. He brought her a bottle of wine and a silk scarf. Eleanor smiled and thanked him. She didn't ask questions. She just said she was glad he had enjoyed his trip. Michael didn't realize that behind her soft voice and tired smile, a storm was brewing. Chloe, too, was growing impatient. She started asking Michael when they would move in together. She wanted to meet his family. She wanted her name on things. Michael promised her again and again that it was only a matter of time. What he didn't know was that time was running out, not just for his lies, but for everything he thought he controlled, because Eleanor had started writing a new will. And this time, Michael's name was about to disappear from it entirely. Eleanor had always been a quiet, graceful woman. She believed in kindness, in giving people the benefit of the doubt, and in solving problems with calmness instead of anger. But after months of silence and suffering, something inside her had changed. She had once loved Michael with all her heart, trusted him, even given him control over her finances. But now, she felt like a fool, used, betrayed, and alone. Still, she didn't let those feelings control her. Instead, she started thinking clearly. She decided that she would not shout, cry, or beg. She would act. And she would do it her way. Eleanor knew her time was limited. Her illness was getting worse. Some days she had energy to walk around and sit in the garden. Other days she could barely get out of bed. But her mind was still sharp. So she used the time she had to plan what many would later call one of the most brilliant acts of quiet revenge. The first thing she did was hire a private investigator. She didn't tell anyone, not even the nurse who stayed with her during the day. The man's name was Lewis. He was a retired detective now working privately. Eleanor met him in her lawyer's office and explained everything. And she told him that her husband, Michael, was having an affair and spending her money on another woman. Lewis didn't look shocked. He had seen many similar cases before. But he could tell that Eleanor was not just any client. She wasn't interested in public drama or legal revenge. She wanted facts, proof, evidence that couldn't be denied. Lewis started watching Michael. It didn't take long. Within a week, he had photographs of Michael and Chloe having lunch at a rooftop restaurant. holding hands while shopping and walking out of a hotel together. There were bank records, 2 large withdrawals matching the dates of trips and gifts. Louis even found out that Michael had rented an apartment for Chloe under a fake company name. Everything was clear. Michael was not just cheating. He was deeply involved in another relationship and using Eleanor's money to fund it. When Louis gave Eleanor the file, she didn't even flinch. She took the folder, thanked him, and sat quietly with the evidence. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in her study, reading each page carefully, looking at each photograph with a strange sense of peace. The truth no longer hurt had simply confirmed what she already knew. Now, it was time to act. The next day, she called her lawyer, Mr. Langley, and asked for a private meeting. Mr. Langley had known Eleanor since her father was alive. He had helped manage her inheritance, her charities, and her estate. When she told him she wanted to rewrite her will, he was surprised, but not shocked. He had suspected for some time that Michael was not the man he pretended to be. Eleanor spent the next few days working closely with Mr. Langley. She made changes to everything: her will, her trusts, her property arrangements, and even her medical instructions. Removed Michael from every financial document that mattered: the mansion, the cars, the bank accounts, the stocks, and the jewelry. All of it was redirected into a charitable trust in the name of her first husband, Harold. It would be used to fund women's shelters, hospitals, and educational programs for poor children. Michael would get nothing, but Eleanor wasn't finished. She created a clause in the new will, special condition. It stated that Michael would only receive a small monthly allowance, and only if he agreed to stay completely away from Chloe. If he ever contacted her again, even once, the payments would stop immediately. She also arranged for this clause to be read aloud, in front of everyone, after her death. Mr. Langley asked if she was sure, told her that this could cause a scandal. Eleanor simply nodded. "If I don't stand up for myself now," she said, "then everything I've built in my life means nothing." At home, Eleanor acted as if everything was normal. She still smiled at Michael, still asked about his day, and even helped him plan his next fake business trip. Michael had no idea that his life was about to collapse. He believed he was in control, that Eleanor was too weak, too old, and too blind to notice anything. He had become arrogant. One evening, Michael came home late. He smelled like perfume, but not Eleanor's. He kissed her on the forehead and said, "Sorry, darling." The meeting went longer than expected. Eleanor smiled and said she hoped it was productive. Then she asked if he could sit with her for a while. She said she had been feeling lonely. Michael looked annoyed, but agreed. He sat down on the couch and pretended to care. Eleanor looked at him and said softly, "Do you love me?" Michael, caught off guard, quickly said, "Of course I do, honey." "Why would you ask that?" Eleanor nodded. "Just wanted to hear it. That's all." Later that night, Michael left again, claiming he had to meet someone early the next morning. Eleanor watched from the window as he drove off in her car. She wasn't sad anymore. She was ready. A few weeks passed. Eleanor's condition worsened. The nurse told Michael that she might not have much time left. Michael started visiting more often, pretending to care, making calls to doctors and telling people how worried he was. But at the same time, he was still seeing Chloe, still spending money, still dreaming of a future without Eleanor in it. One day, while Eleanor was resting in bed, Michael walked into her room and said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should sell the country house. It's too far away, and we never visit. We could use that money to invest in something better." Eleanor looked at him with tired eyes and said, "If that's what you think is best." Michael smiled. He thought she was giving up. He had no idea that the house had already been removed from his reach. Behind the scenes, Eleanor had finalized everything. The new will was signed, witnessed, and locked in Mr. Langley's office. All financial changes were in place. Michael was now completely shut out, and he didn't even know it. As the days passed, Eleanor began to write a letter. A legal document? Just something personal? A letter to Michael? She didn't write it in anger. She wrote it with clarity and honesty. In the letter, she told him that she had loved him once, truly, but that he had broken her trust in the worst possible way. She wrote that she had seen through his lies long ago, but waited to act because she wanted to understand his true character. And now she did. She wrote that her silence had been her strength, and that he would soon understand that actions have consequences. She sealed the letter and gave it to Mr. Langley, with instructions to hand it to Michael after the will was read. Eleanor spent her last days peacefully. She didn't talk much. She spent time in the garden, listening to the birds, looking at the flowers she had planted with her first husband. She sometimes smiled to herself, knowing that she had taken back her power without shouting, without revenge, without hatred. She had done it with intelligence and grace. The day she passed away, Michael cried loudly at the hospital. He held her hand and told the nurse he had lost the love of his life. He arranged a grand funeral, invited many people, and gave a long speech about Eleanor's kindness and generosity. Chloe came too, dressed in black, standing quietly in the back. Michael had told her not to be seen, but she wanted to be there. Curious about the woman she had replaced in Michael's life, after the funeral, Michael was excited. He finally believed he would have access to Eleanor's full fortune. He imagined paying off debts, taking Chloe on a world tour, and buying a house in Spain. He called Mr. Langley the next day to ask about the will. Mr. Langley told him that a reading had been arranged for the following week at his office. Michael couldn't wait. He arrived at the lawyer's office dressed in a dark suit, acting like a grieving widower. Several people were there: Lanor's relatives, her charity partners, her nurse, and Mr. Langley. They all sat down, and Mr. Langley opened the file. What happened next would change Michael's life forever, but that was still a few days away. For now, Michael continued living in the illusion that he had won. He didn't know that the truth was coming not in anger, not in violence, but in words carefully written and decisions cleverly made by the very woman he thought he had fooled. He was about to learn that Eleanor had never been weak. She had simply waited for the right moment to show her strength. The funeral was grand. Flowers were everywhere: white roses, lilies, and orchids. A large photo of Eleanor stood on a wooden easel near the casket. Her eyes still looked wise and calm, just like when she was alive. People came in black clothes, whispering quietly about how kind and generous she had been. There were people from charities she had helped, family members who hadn't visited in years, and even some people who just came because she was famous in the city. Her death had made the local news. Everyone had something good to say about her, everyone, except the one person who should have meant it most, her husband. Michael stood in front of the crowd, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. He gave a long emotional speech about how much he loved Eleanor, how deeply he would miss her, and how she had been the light of his life. Many people in the audience wiped their tears. They believed him. After all, he looked like a broken man. But deep inside, Michael was not sad. He was excited as he stood there talking about Eleanor's kindness. His mind was thinking about something else: the money. The fortune she had, properties, the investments, the jewelry, and the mansion. For months, he had been waiting for this moment. Now that she was gone, he believed everything would soon be his. He imagined a life of luxury with Chloe traveling the world, buying more cars, more watches, maybe even starting a business in her name. He had already started planning how to sell the mansion and where to move next. To everyone else, he looked like a heartbroken husband. But to himself, he was a man finally getting the reward he believed he deserved. Chloe came to the funeral too, but quietly. She stood at the back, dressed in a simple black dress, wearing sunglasses. Michael had told her not to be seen too much, not to talk to anyone, and to leave early. He didn't want people to start asking questions. She had agreed, but she still wanted to be there, maybe out of curiosity, maybe to see the woman whose place she had taken, or maybe because she too wanted to feel like a part of the new life that was about to begin. After the service, people came up to Michael, hugging him, offering words of sympathy. He accepted all of it with a sad smile. But inside, he just wanted to go home and wait for the lawyer's call. He didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Michael received the call from Mr. Langley, Eleanor's longtime lawyer. He was invited to a formal reading of the will. Michael dressed carefully that morning, choosing a black suit and a gray tie. He wanted to look respectful, but also calm and confident. He arrived early at the lawyer's office, thinking he would be the main guest. But when he entered the room, he was surprised to see others, their Eleanor's distant cousins, her nurse, a few charity representatives, and even to young women from her old school. Michael was confused. Why were all these people here? But he smiled politely and took his seat. He told himself, "Don't worry. You're her husband. Everything will be yours." Mr. Langley walked in with a serious face. He held a brown folder in his hands. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at him. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Langley said. "As you know, Eleanor made changes to her will not long before her passing. She asked me to read it out loud in the presence of everyone named in the document." Michael leaned forward slightly. He was ready. The lawyer opened the folder and began reading. The day of the will reading had arrived. It was a sunny afternoon, but the atmosphere in the lawyer's office was heavy. Michael had dressed in a black suit with a navy blue tie. He walked in slowly, pretending to be deep in sorrow, but inside, he felt confident. For weeks he had been imagining this moment. In his mind, he had already won. He had convinced himself that everything Eleanor owned would soon belong to him. After all, he was her husband. Who else could she have trusted more than him? The lawyer's office was large, with shelves full of books and a long table at the center. Several people were already seated when Michael arrived. Eleanor's cousin Claire was there. She had always been close to Eleanor and looked at Michael with cold eyes. Next to her sat two older women who had worked with Eleanor in her charity foundation. Behind them were a few others, people Eleanor had helped, supported, or cared about during her life. The nurse who had cared for Eleanor in her last days was also present. Everyone sat quietly, waiting for Mr. Langley to arrive. Michael took a seat near the front. He noticed there was no seat marked, especially for him, which annoyed him a little. Still, he stayed calm. He smiled at Claire, who did not return the smile. In his mind, he kept repeating the same thought. This is just formality. The money's already mine. Finally, Mr. Langley walked in. He was in his 60s, wearing a gray suit and carrying a large brown envelope. He looked around the room and gave a polite nod before sitting down. He didn't say much at first. He just opened the envelope, took out several documents, and placed them carefully on the table. Then he looked up and spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. We are gathered to fulfill the final wishes of Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, who passed away 2 weeks ago. This will is dated 6 months before her passing and was prepared with full legal witness and verification. I ask that everyone listen carefully. What is read today is legally binding." Michael leaned back, ready to hear the words that would confirm what he believed. But the moment Mr. Langley began to read, everything started to feel wrong. The will began with Eleanor's personal message to those present. She had written in her own words how grateful she was for the people in her life, especially those who had supported her through difficult times. She mentioned her late husband Harold, her father, and the people who had worked with her in her foundation. She also expressed sadness at the betrayal she had experienced near the end of her life. That line made Michael shift in his seat. He looked down, suddenly unsure of himself. Mr. Langley continued reading. The first item was Eleanor's home, the mansion where she and Michael had lived. It was not going to Michael. Instead, it was being donated to her foundation and would be turned into a shelter for women and children. Gasps filled the room. Michael blinked, thinking maybe he had heard wrong. But Mr. Langley read it again. Clearly, next came the cars, the paintings, and the jewelry. All were going to the foundation or being auctioned off to raise money for causes Eleanor had supported. The guests nodded, some with tears in their eyes. They knew how much Eleanor had cared about her charity work. Michael, however, sat frozen. This wasn't what he expected at all. Mr. Langley then read about Eleanor's business shares and investment accounts. They were being split between educational programs for orphaned girls and a hospital wing being built in her father's name. Michael looked pale. He leaned forward and whispered, "What about me?" Mr. Langley didn't respond right away. He simply kept reading. When he finally got to Michael's name, the room went quiet. Mr. Langley read slowly, carefully, without emotion. To my husband, Michael Thompson, he read, I leave the following: a monthly allowance of $5,000. To be paid only if he fulfills a condition which is explained in a separate clause. If he fails to meet this condition, all payments will stop immediately. Michael stared in disbelief. $5,000 a month was nothing compared to the fortune he had been expecting. He opened his mouth to speak, but Mr. Langley raised his hand to continue. He read the condition. Michael must end all contact with Miss Chloe Reynolds, directly or indirectly. He is to have no communication with her, no meetings, no financial support, and no assistance of any kind. This will be monitored for 1 year. If he breaks this condition, all payments will stop permanently. Now the room was no longer quiet. People were whispering, some gasping, others looking at Michael with curiosity or judgment. Michael's face had turned red. He stood up suddenly and shouted, "This is insane. This is not legal. She must have been forced. She was sick."
Esther.
Langley looked at him calmly. I can assure you, Mr. Thompson, everything was done legally, with full mental capacity, verified by a medical expert. Eleanor was of sound mind. Michael tried to argue again, but no one listened. He looked around the room and saw the nurse shaking her head. Claire was staring at him like she had known all along. One of the charity women whispered to another, "She was smarter than we thought." Michael felt trapped. Then Mr. Langley took out one final document. "There is a personal letter," he said, "written by Eleanor and to be read privately to Mr. Thompson. If he wishes, I can read it aloud or give it to him alone." Michael sat back down slowly. His hands were shaking. "Read it," he muttered. Mr. Langley unfolded the letter and began. "Dear Michael, if you are hearing this, it means I have left this world. I wish I could say that I left with peace in my heart, but that would not be the full truth. What you did to me, the lies, the betrayal, the money you took, cut deeper than any illness ever could. I once believed you loved me. I gave you everything. I had, not just wealth, but my trust. And you threw it away for someone half my age who didn't even know my name." Michael's lips tightened. His fists were clenched. "I found out everything months before I passed. I knew about Chloe, the trips, the spending. I hired someone to follow you, and I saw the photos. I saw your face smiling for another woman while I was at home struggling to breathe. But I did not cry. I did not scream. Chose a different path. One of dignity. You took advantage of my kindness, so I decided to teach you something about loss, about regret, and about consequences. Everything you thought would be yours is now helping women who have been betrayed like I was. Children will go to school. Others will find shelter. You, Michael, will have to live with the truth. You had it all, and you lost it not. Because of bad luck, but because of your own choices. If you truly want the allowance I've left you, then prove it. Walk away from Chloe. Show yourself that you can live with integrity even now. If you cannot do that, then you do not deserve a penny of what I built. I hope one day you understand why I did this." Eleanor, when the letter ended, the room was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Michael sat still, staring at the table, completely destroyed. A few minutes later, people started leaving. Some shook hands with Mr. Langley. Others hugged each other, sharing stories about Eleanor. Michael didn't speak. Didn't even notice Chloe walking into the office. She had come late, curious to see what was happening. She had heard something from a friend and decided to see it for herself. She saw Michael sitting alone. She walked over and asked, "What happened? Did you get it?" Michael didn't look at her, just handed her the printed condition clause. Chloe read it, and her face changed. "So I'm the reason you don't get anything?" she said angrily. She blamed me? Michael finally looked at her. "It's not about you," he said. "It's about what I did." Chloe stepped back. "Well, if being with me ruined your money, maybe you should go," she snapped. "I'm not going to be poor with you." "That wasn't the deal." Michael didn't reply. Just watched her walk out of the room, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. The woman he had thrown everything away for had just left him without looking back. That night, Michael went home alone. The mansion was still his home for a short time. Leonore's lawyer had given him 30 days to move out. He walked through the empty rooms, remembering every lie he had told, every smile he had faked, every night he had left Eleanor sitting alone. He sat on the edge of their bed and cried for the first time in years. He had lost the money, the woman, and the future he thought he owned. But more than that, he had lost the respect of everyone who had once trusted Jim, including himself. And somewhere, far beyond the silence of the house, Eleanor's final words seemed to echo, "You had it all, and you lost it."